when these men would see you, even if they were to, like, let's say, get a glimpse of this much of your ankle, because they are so deprived of kind of seeing any women in society that aren't covered up, they would literally follow you. Places like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, they've got prisons that they have deliberately made in the middle of nowhere, like just surrounded by desert. So it's very, very hard for people to get to you, and they'll just keep you there for months and months and years where you're just forgotten about. So I lived in a city called Jeddah, which was a little bit more lax, if you can call it that, than Riyadh. Is the capital. The expats would call it Chop Chop Square because of literally, as you can imagine, what took place there.
Oh my gosh.
According to Sharia, like, for example, if you steal something, then the hand that you've stolen with should be chopped off, which again, it's ridiculous because most poor people are going to resort to that. So if you cut off their ability to, ever work in life or do anything, how do you ever expect them to better their situation? After the prayers, they would call out the list on the loudspeaker of the names of the criminals and the crimes that they've been committed, and therefore the punishment that is due according to Sharia. If he's stolen, let's say, a loaf of bread with the right hand, he's going to get his right hand amputated. And all the mosque goers, all the people who have just prayed, can just make their way out to the back and watch this happen in real time. It's a nightmare. It absolutely is. It's all a sham.
Hey, my name is Shelise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening and you would like to see our faces, go to our YouTube channel at Cults to Consciousness. You can join in on the conversation there. We love seeing the words of encouragement left by our incredible community, helping our guests feel supported and welcomed. Remember, they are real people telling their stories, being raw and vulnerable with us. And of course, it helps the algorithm. So today's guest, we reached out to her. We were connected by Apostate Prophet. We are very happy to be introduced to her channel, where she discusses Islam and she discusses human rights, freedoms, activism, and all of those things over there that are so important. So make sure you go and check out her channel and subscribe to there as well. Today we're going to be diving into her story growing up in Saudi Arabia, what it was like being married and trying to escape Dubai and officially escaping Dubai. So there's a lot to cover. Thank you so much for joining us, Nuriyah Khan from Holy Humanist.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Excited.
Yay! All right, so yes, you're doing a lot of great work over on your channel. For someone who's brand new to it, how would you describe it?
Thank you. First of all, I would describe it as, I guess, just a channel that was started on the back of a very lived experience with Sharia, and it kind of opened my eyes to what Islam was. So in a way, it's all the topics that have fascinated me or continue to fascinate me once I've left Islam. But more poignantly than that, it's kind of showing, or trying to show anyway, Muslim women the realities of Islam that were hidden to me as well, until it got too late that I actually, discovered what it was all about. So it is just trying to show the lack of women's rights in Islam, and kind of just a continuous expose, if you will.
Okay, yeah. And something that we always preface, no matter which group we're talking about, is that this isn't necessarily a blanket statement for everyone who practices, because I think you'd agree there's a variance of how people choose to practice and how they accept the doctrine. So would you have any sort of disclaimers before we start?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any of my initial videos give plenty of disclaimers as well. The first one is obvious, being this is not kind of aimed to be anti-Muslim rhetoric. There's a huge distinction between Islam and Muslims, and we have to remember that. So, like, I guess with any, let's say, cult, for lack of a better word, that's gotten out of hand, I think many of the Muslims who actually believe in different versions of Islam, or Islam light, I like to call it, are potentially way better than the doctrine itself. So my focus is strictly on showing the Islamic sources and the doctrine I come from a Sunni Muslim background. So the main scripture that we have according to Sunni Islam, I find that extremely problematic. Again, I think it inspires terrorism and things like that. So I would always give that caveat that all I'm trying to show is Islam as a Muslim should believe it. And as you said, not many Muslims or all Muslims do believe it in that manner. And I'm forever grateful for that. But yeah, Islam still needs to be talked about.
Yeah, thank you for that. So let's talk about your childhood. Would you say that your background is more of a fundamentalist sect? You said Sunni. Is that more of like a strict type of Islam practice?
So Sunni is, I guess, one of the biggest denominations, if you will, of Muslims. So you've got like Sunni and Shias, which are the two main breakaway groups, I guess, which happened after the Prophet's death, that split. So yeah, I think it's one of the most mainstream way of believing in Islam, but it's not fundamental. You can't just say like one, like entire Sunni Islam is fundamental. So
Mm,
even within Sunni Islam, you have many different branches. And again, in some parts of the world they apply, and in some parts of the world you can go along your life saying I'm a Sunni Muslim, and you could be varying degrees of liberal to, ultra conservative within that.
okay. I'm glad that you clarified that. I'm still very new to this and I'm learning, so I appreciate your patience with me trying to figure all of this out. Let's talk more about your childhood then. You grew up in Saudi Arabia, right?
Yeah, well, actually, I was born in London and I lived here till I was 9,
Mm.
and then we essentially moved to Saudi Arabia for my dad's job, and I spent I guess most of my adolescent years in Saudi Arabia and then in Dubai after that. But yeah, just to follow up on your point as well. So my family themselves were, I guess I'd say, moderate to conservative in their leanings towards Islam. So while I lived in England, I lived with my grandparents, and they're quite traditional and conservative. So again, religion in terms of Islam and our conservative Pakistani culture would kind of blur into one at some points. But yeah, like you said, even like the way that you're learning, I'm still learning about branches within Islam that I had no idea existed. But yeah, so I came from a very kind of, I guess, moderate to conservative. We were culturally conservative, but not ultra religious, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So I'm sure there's going to be a drastic difference from growing up in London and then moving to Saudi Arabia. So, what are some of the things that immediately changed for you when you moved?
Yes, though, that's a great question because one would think that obviously life got a lot more intense in Saudi Arabia. But when I was growing up in London, my grandfather was the imam. So like he was I guess the leader of that mosque. He would
Mm.
do the call to prayer 5 times a day. He would open the mosque first thing in the morning for like the dawn prayer. And because of like how close I was to him anyway, I would go to mosque and spend a lot more time there. And I would get involved in like Quran recital competitions, all of this kind of on like an extracurricular basis after school. So I was really kind of heavily into it. And by 9, I started to wear the hijab here in England because that's what my Quran teacher told me. And that's what, we were taking away from the classes about what God expects you to do as a girl of 9 years old. So it was actually just before I moved to Saudi Arabia that I decided to take off the headscarf because I started playing a lot more sports and it was just impractical, to be honest. But again, I like to make this distinction because in my case, funnily enough, and I'm grateful for it now in hindsight, but my parents, like most Muslim households, that, hijab is expected of you and there is pressure behind closed doors. My my parents actually like asked me over and over again, "Are you sure?" And they kind of tried to dissuade me from wearing it because of how young I was, and they understand the taboo with that comes with taking it off as opposed to putting it on. So there's a
Mm.
lot more backlash once you take it off as opposed to if you just decide to do it later in life. So that was kind of just a snapshot of how I was in London. And then moving to Saudi Arabia, obviously you'd expect that it would get a lot more intense because we're moving to supposedly the home of Islam, where the house of God is located as well, in Mecca. So moving there, again, we went to a very, very British international school, which was so multicultural, and had people from like all kind of countries, walks of life, religions that I'd never even heard of before in my little kind of bubble of London. And because Islam became so apparent in everyday life, I mean, you had to wear an abaya as you're outside in public. Women aren't allowed to drive. That you're enforced to go and pray if you hear the call to prayer as a man, especially. So all of these things were happening in the background. I decided I didn't need to kind of show my Muslim identity that much. I could just calm it down a little bit. And as I was meeting all these new people, all these kind of new ideas were filling into my head. I've heard of religions, like I said, I'd never heard of before. And I kind of started comparing Islam, my own religion that I was brought up in, against theirs for the first time. Still very much a believer, but yeah, it just kind of really opened my eyes to things. But having said that, Shalise, there was also the concept of really, really dark Islam playing out behind international experience I was having. So like my brother and dad would go and read Friday prayer in the mosque, and then they would actually have like amputations and beheadings afterwards as per Sharia.
Oh, wait a second. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a lot. I feel like we need to dive into that more because this is the first I'm hearing of that.
Yeah, it's wild. So I lived in a city called Jeddah, which was a little bit more lax, if you can call it that, than Riyadh. Is the capital, and that's where it's very, very heavily enforced. So they actually have a square. I'm not sure if they still have it or it's still called that, but when I was there, the expats would call it Chop Chop Square because of literally, as you can imagine, what took place there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so, according to Sharia, like for example, if you steal something, then the hand that you've stolen with should be chopped off, which again, it's ridiculous because most poor people are going to resort to that. So, if you cut off their ability to, ever work in life or do anything, how do you ever expect them to better their situation? But essentially, long story short, what they would do is after the prayers, they would call out the list on the loudspeaker of the names of the criminals and the crimes that they've been committed, and therefore the punishment that is due according to Sharia. So if he's stolen, let's say, a loaf of bread with the right hand, he's going to get his right hand amputated. And all the mosque goers, all the people who have just prayed, can just make their way out to the back and watch this happen in real time.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay, so you said amputations, and did I hear you correctly? You said beheadings?
yeah.
So what would a crime be to warrant a beheading?
It really depends, and I hate to say this, but this is how a lot of the Gulf countries in the Middle East work. It really depends on your nationality and kind of how much the embassy has kind of backed your corner. But if there was something, for example, like you are, let's say, well, definitely if you've said anything against Islam, right? If you've committed blasphemy in their eyes, or you've gone against the state or the country in any way, but also sometimes for lower level things like drug offenses or bootlegging. It really all depends. If they're in a bad mood and you've done a crime that might not even meet the threshold for death, you might just get it, especially if your home country is not kind of standing your corner, or they know you're just, no one's going to ask about you, and that they can get away with it. But yeah, definitely blasphemy and apostasy and things like that.
Wow, that's terrifying. Are there any sort of trials, or do people just say, I think you did this crime, or I'm accusing you of this, and we're just going to follow through with the punishment?
Well, theoretically, there's a trial, but again, you can call it a kangaroo court, you can call it a sham trial, because I mean, I experienced like a fraction of this with what I went through, well, had gone through in Dubai, which we'll come to. But I mean, this is that happening on a grand scale. So from the minute that you're accused or you're charged, every single aspect of the process is in Arabic. And again, like I said, if you haven't got the might of your home country backing you, or if they don't respect your passport enough, which they don't to a lot of nationalities, I'm just going to put it that way. There is definitely a hierarchy at play. But from you don't get given a lawyer. That's not like a natural right that you have. You have no idea if you're going to be represented in court. And then when the judge is reading out the charges leveled against you in court, you have no idea what's being said. So usually if you listen to these people's stories who have been charged and tried, the court hearing is over within 20 to 30 seconds sometimes, with the judge just uttering some words in Arabic, boom, stamping something, and that's it. You could be waiting, languishing behind jail for months, not knowing where you stand, and then one day they could just call you out from death row and do what they, well, basically, yeah, your worst nightmare comes true. And the complete opposite is true, where they might not even put you out of your misery, and they'll just keep you there for months and months and years, where you're just forgotten about. And places like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, they've got prisons that they have deliberately made in the middle of, like, honestly nowhere, like just surrounded by desert. So it's very, very hard for people to get to you, even like people of the embassy to come and visit you. It's a nightmare. It absolutely is. It's all a sham.
Wow. So this, forgive my ignorance, is still going on today?
I don't think they've beheaded anybody for a number of years now, which is very, very good. But they are still languishing on death row, and like I said, they leave them there without any kind of prospects of their future. So yeah, you wouldn't want to get in trouble or go against the law in that country like that. But yeah, I'm pretty sure they would still have the. I hate to say low level because that doesn't sound the right word for it, but they would still have the low level Sharia they're called hudud punishments. Hudud are the strictest punishments according to Islamic law. They would still carry out those. And sorry, also just to let you know how dire the situation is. They once, let's say, if you do die in prison or you do get beheaded or whatever, they weren't even repatriating bodies, so they wouldn't even do the family the kind of then give them the last rights to see whoever
Mm.
was charged in Saudi Arabia for XYZ reason.
Wow, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So, when did you become aware of this sort of thing playing in the background when you were a kid?
Oh, very, very early on. So I moved to Saudi Arabia when I was 9 years old. And I mean, we would just be driving around to and fro places. And again, like I said, on a casual Friday where we're waiting for my brother and my dad to come home so we can go out for lunch, this is what they've just seen or heard or kind of witnessed. And so they obviously passed it on. And then again, as a 9, 10, 11-year old child, I do ask my parents those things naturally, like, you're hearing about that. You can hear the call to prayer. You can hear some announcements. And even within school, I had some friends who were not from the Sunni Muslim sect. They were Shia Muslims or other kinds of Muslims, and they weren't allowed to say that openly. They were very fearful. And I didn't understand that either until I realized, oh, Saudi Arabia is a very Sunni state, like that they don't like Shias, and that's why they don't even like Shias kind of exerting themselves there. So if they were going to mosque, they'd go to kind of more undercover mosques to pray. They wouldn't be attending the bigger mosques that you would see most of the rest of us attending. So these kind of things were playing on my mind a lot, but my parents easily pushed it to the side and said, look, this is Saudi Arabia. And it's true, they follow Wahhabi Islam, which is a very extreme form of Islam. So they were trying to make me feel like, listen, this is Islam gone wrong. This is Islam
Oh,
pushed to the extremist form that we don't follow. And so I kind of just placated myself with that thought while I was there. To be honest, that's how I kind of just pushed these things to the back of my mind. But at the same time, I was slowly getting more and more liberalized in my thinking. So those kind of two things were at play at the same time.
right. So, what were some of the things that you noticed culturally that were different from London, where you grew up in Saudi Arabia?
So if you can imagine, so you're trying to be like a normal young child going to school and having friends and hanging out on the weekends and stuff like that. But I lived in a compound which was basically like a mini version of being somewhere in the States, but plonked in the middle of Saudi Arabia. And we had a lot of US military who lived on our compound too. So it was quite high profile. But within the compounds, the normal rules of society don't really apply. So
Mm.
like you can be in bikinis, you have a swimming pool outside your house. I'm not saying women can drive, because technically you shouldn't even be driving within compounds. But let's say if I wanted to, like, I was, really getting eager to start learning how to drive, I could go for a cheeky round in the car, like, or ride a quad bike or whatever. You could kind of push those boundaries. People would be brewing their own alcohol in their homes there because that was the only way to do it. We'd get pirated films that would come and be sold there because there's no concept of the cinema. And things that were really weird for me was just this level of segregation of society. So if we'd go out to go shopping, for example, you have to only go with the drivers that are connected to your compound, because the rest is just, every taxi driver it's considered too unsafe. And I've heard, like, there was a horrible story that transpired while I was actually at school there, where one of my art teachers got taken. I mean, you're not supposed to use these taxi drivers, but if you're a single woman, again, I'm not sure why you would move to Saudi Arabia in the first place, but the money and the perks that they attract you with are so good. It's called a hardship, though, in that some people take the offer. So one of my art teachers, bless her, she took one of these taxis and he drove her into the middle of the desert and raped her and left her there. And again, this is Saudi Arabia. There is nowhere you were ever going to get justice for this. So she literally came to school the next day, packed her bags, didn't say a word, and just left the country. And the difference I saw in that woman, like, she was, like a shadow of her former self within that change that happened in 24 hours. But again, something like that, it was such a traumatic event as a child. I just pushed it to my mind. I didn't think about, even though I knew inside, like, why couldn't she not just stay here and get justice? Surely, like, this is a crime that has happened to her. She has no part to play in this. But the state is essentially saying she has a part to play in this. That's what Islamic law tells you if that's happened,
Mm.
unless there's four witnesses. So these things were like really kind of messing with me. But then my own experiences when I would go, let's say, shopping or something, you'd have to wear an abaya. And when these men would see you, even if they were to, like, let's say, get a glimpse of this much of your ankle, because they are so deprived of kind of seeing any women in society that aren't covered up, they would literally follow you. And they would follow you and kind of, I'd have to walk into shops with my friends, and we'd ask the security to just keep us, like, let us stay there until these guys walk off, until your compound car would come and pick you up again. So there was all of these kind of weird aspects of society, like everybody that's selling stuff, all the shop owners, everybody, they're all men. So even if you're trying to go and buy, like, undergarments or something, it's men selling you bras. It's just a weird concept. All of society is men. And the fact that, like, we couldn't even go to restaurants with boys from our class, because you're not supposed to be mixing with men who, you're not, that considered your mahram in Islam, so you're not blood related to. Basically anyone you can marry, you're not supposed to be hanging out with,
Mm.
technically. So there were times in the mall where, if there were, like, guys from our school, when we'd see the Islamic police coming, when I lived there, the Islamic police was a big thing. Now it's much less of a thing, thankfully. But the Islamic police would essentially ask you how you're related. And then if they weren't satisfied, you would get penalized, obviously. So you'd have to always be really mindful of your surroundings.
Wow, that sounds really scary for a young girl. So, can we talk a little bit about how you felt? Did you feel targeted? Did you feel unsafe?
So, in terms of, like, within the compound gates and within school, you felt very, very safe. Like, a lot of the times when people ask me, like, how was your childhood in Saudi Arabia? It must have been crazy. I would say, minus these things that I'm describing to you, which is the hyper extreme Islam manifesting itself or playing out, it was an amazing life. We literally lived on what you could consider a permanent holiday camp, a swimming pool outside, a park, a bowling recreational center. All your friends live nearby. You can go to bed without locking your doors at night. The compound has security. It was honestly the best time, if you consider school and that, for a child to grow up, despite being Saudi Arabia. It's just, so I didn't feel safe in that sense. It's like I said, as soon as you would transgress the walls of the compound, that's when real Saudi Arabia would hit you, and you'd have to be very mindful as a young girl of, is my abaya on? I'm not allowed to get into any car. I need to stay away from these men. I literally have to go from mall to the house to the restaurant. You know what I mean? There's no scope for you to just, like, wander around town. That's not a done thing.
Right. So, within that, it's like a world within a world, really. And that must have been a really interesting dichotomy to grow up in. So, if you didn't have the, I guess you could say, privilege of being in that compound, life outside seemed pretty scary for the average person.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, we would see people who live in villas. It's mostly a lot of the Saudis, obviously they do, but some of the Arab, like, friends that I went to school with, they who weren't connected to any compound. I would always ask them that, like, how is life for you? Because I could not imagine just having that as your Saudi experience.
Hmm.
It was only, like you said, because of the world within the world that made it bearable. Otherwise, it would have been beyond suffocating, and just, I guess, not reason enough to live there.
Right. So let's talk about then your teen years and kind of because it seems like you're living within two separate worlds, one that's a lot more liberal or maybe progressive or just kind of lax on the rules, and then also this outside world that you have to deal with on occasion. So, what was it like for you when you were a teenager and you started to maybe have crushes on boys?
So again, this was a really weird one to navigate, because we were in a co-ed school and we're doing the international curriculum. So technically it's like going to school in any Western country in the world. So we had discos, we had, like, mini prom things, everything was uh it was literally like going to school here. We'd have parties, all the kind of teenage parties that you'd have. The only thing we probably couldn't get our hands on much was alcohol and things like that you'd do a lot quicker if you were in the Western world, and a lot easier. But again, because the culture I come from, the general religious views that I held, all of those things were kind of natural and I would have normal interactions with guys. I would say, like, I mean, I even had a boyfriend in school, but it was done in a really like you kind of have to, I guess with cognitive dissonance you go ahead because it's so hard to meet up. It's so, you don't go on like dates or anything. The only time you really can meet technically is at school, or if they come to your compound, I guess, and you all hang out again there because our families are conservative and the compound has security. You're always mindful. But like you said, Shalise, it was only because of the world within the world that you could do that. You could arrange to, have a party or meet up at the skate park in someone's compound, and that would be the closest thing to hanging out with your boyfriend or, going to the cinema or something like that. So yeah, it does really limit you in that way, and I guess it just reinforces you to be more conservative because there's not scope and opportunities to do anything. And then in terms of like at school, talking about sex education or even like reproduction, because we were in Saudi Arabia, our science books were like taped together or glued together in some
Oh,
pages because yeah, where it had like an image of, the uterus and stuff like that, like basic biology.
oh.
They really, yeah, they would like send letters home before they talked to the girls about their periods. And then they would like, it was everything was just kind of tiptoed around really carefully when it comes to like gender mixing or that kind of stuff.
So you actually did get a semblance of sex education, even though you didn't get nearly enough or like what you should have. It seems like at least you had an awareness of what a menstrual cycle was.
Yeah, they gave that kind of one assembly to the girls, and it was just a thing that I think it was in year six. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the US equivalent is, but something like that. They would take the guys to go somewhere else for like an hour, and they would explain it to the girls. So yeah, that we did have that.
Okay. Yeah, that just reminds me of the Mean Girls assembly.
Yeah,
Don't have sex or you will get chlamydia and die.
yeah, that's essentially what they were saying to us.
Okay, like abstinence only stuff, basically.
They can't really do that because like you said, we are an international school, so technically here we're supposed to be following the British curriculum, which not allows for but requires sex education. Now they are trying to navigate teaching these kids the British curriculum, but within the confines of Saudi Arabia as a country's rule on what they say is permissible in schools. So that's why I'm saying, even with like English textbooks, for them to go through it and black out things with a marker or glue pages together, that's not the school's demand. That's Saudi Arabia saying to the school, we will allow you to operate here and offer this curriculum if you play by our rules on this and this and this.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a clashing situation
Yeah,
because obviously you want the British curriculum and then you have a country that's like yes but no, so essentially you're still kind of getting the Saudi Arabia curriculum in so many ways.
the Saudi Arabia censorship, yeah, at least applied to the
Yeah.
curriculum for sure.
Okay. So, is there anything else that you want to talk about your childhood before we get into your marriage, as far as things that you had seen or things that stood out to you about the religion that started to affect you at an early age?
So when I got married, obviously I came back to the Middle East as an adult. But at this point, when I was still in Saudi Arabia, like I said, my faith in my religion was really still there, even though I wasn't like the best, most practicing conservative Muslim. We would basically, like I said, because we lived in Jeddah, which is relatively close to Mecca, which is the house of God, which is what people save up their whole lives. Oh, sorry, Muslims who, because it's one of the five pillars of Islam to do that if you can afford to do it. So many Muslims around the world literally spend their life savings on going to do this.
Hmm.
Some do it more than once, which is not required. But if you can imagine the kind of sense of just thinking, wow, like God has brought you and given you the opportunity to live so close to his house that essentially every weekend we could do a pilgrimage there and do what most people yearn to do their whole lives. If you ask a Muslim who doesn't live in Saudi Arabia or has never been, like a devout one, what would be like your dream, it would probably be that. So even like dying in Mecca, Shelise, as you're performing the pilgrimage, is like in Islam considered a fast track, instantaneous, like one way to get to heaven.
Oh my
People want to go
gosh.
and die there.
And that's going on right now, right? Because I
Yeah.
saw Apostate Aladdin talking about how already this year 1,000 people have died from heat stroke doing the pilgrimage.
Yeah. Absolutely. And this is what's terrible is like, that they're out there in that insanely humid heat, like usually dehydrated because of the things you have to do in the transportation, the lack of AC in some places. But for the family members of people who do pass away there, they take it as a genuine blessing, a lot of them.
Mm.
It is that, I mean, there's videos I've seen back in the day when I was Muslim of people prostrating in front of the Kaaba and just dying like in the motion of prostration, and they've got like Quranic music playing, but not Quranic music, that's not Quran playing behind that video, and they're saying like, look how beautiful he died, and like, that this is the best way one could ever hope to die. I hope I die like this. People praying to have the same fate, essentially. The reason I wanted to touch on that is just to give you an indication of, I was able to do that pretty much every other weekend or whenever we fancied it. So we could literally just, I could be in my pajamas, put the abaya on, and again, Saudi Arabia, hardship zone. You have drivers, you've got house help, you've got all of these things going on. So we'd get driven to Mecca, spend less than an hour, and do everything, and come back almost feeling renewed, rejuvenated, like you've got all the brownie points in the world. And again, not to get too kind of stuck on Islamic things, but one of the major things in Islam is if you do the mini pilgrimage, which is called the Umrah, if you do that during Ramadan, the holiest month, it is considered to be as if you've done Hajj, the biggest one, right? That's one of the five pillars. So we would do that a lot. And I remember saying to myself as a child, the amount of times I've done Umrah during the month of Ramadan has basically, I've done so many Hajjs that I don't think I need to come back here as an adult to do it again. But all of these little loopholes of getting brownie points, like I was full throttle trying to work my way to heaven. And yeah, maybe not playing by the rules all the time, but like there's a mosque really close to that as well. If you go beyond Mecca to Medina, there's a mosque where every time you pray, it's equal to like 10,000 prayers because it's got like a really superior position in Islamic history. So we went there and we were just up and down praying nonstop. But yeah, what I'm trying to say is we were in a position that most people don't get to be in, and that meant a lot to me. And I kind of held on to that as I moved to Saudi Arabia, as I moved to Dubai just before, like for my last 2 years of school. And then the Islam that I saw in Dubai, which I don't know, you can't call it like real Islam on so many levels, and some levels it is, but this perfect blend of East and meets West in my mind at that point was perfect for my personality. Like the malls are, you can walk around the malls, you could go on dates, you can go to the cinema. It's just normal. Everything is normal. I can learn to drive. You don't have to wear an abaya. You don't have to cover your head. You can go to the beach. There's beach clubs. You can go clubbing. It's just so much more, sorry to say, but normal. So yeah, that was kind of where I was at.
So, when did you move to Dubai?
When I was 16 to 18.
Okay. And is that when you met the person that would become your husband?
No, so I actually did 2 years of schooling in Dubai. Then I moved back here to London for university, and it was like once I'd completed university and then gone back to Dubai as an adult, technically of my own accord. That's when real things went down.
Okay, so then let's get into that. How did you meet this person? Was it an arranged type of marriage? Isn't that pretty common?
Yeah, that's actually very common. And it's also very common from the Pakistani background that I come from. It's essentially like once you're done with university, the natural trajectory for a woman is to get married and then to have kids and blah, 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 right? There's no like scope to go find yourself or go explore or travel. In fact, if you do want to do anything, like if you do want to travel and stuff, they say most parents would tell you that you can do whatever you want once you're in your husband's house, basically. Then you have carte blanche. Until then, because anything that you do that might be just bringing them into disrepute or something, they want it to be on your husband's conscience, not on theirs. Like you've broken away from their family now. We've given you over.
Oh.
Yeah. So essentially, for a lot of Pakistani women, even British Pakistani women, the only way to tasting like a little bit of freedom is literally to get married, and the expectation is so heavy. But yeah, I came back to the UAE, and because I had done my last 2 years of school there. One of my old high school friends introduced me to a friend, which I'd wished this I had never ever accepted to meet this person, but yeah, that's what happened. And about like a year later, because you're not really allowed to date again according to Islam and according to the culture I come from. So it's a very weird like towing the line between what's acceptable for your parents in terms of like, does he come over, does he pick you up and drop you off, did they see his car outside, how much time can you spend in the evening, like can you actually go on a date, that all of these things. So you can't really date for a long term, and it gets very tricky trying to keep your parents happy and trying to make this relationship work. And then my parents decided they were going to move to Malaysia. And I had been moving around so much in my life at this point, and I was quite settled in Dubai. And Malaysia is quite hard to get a job if you're a non-Malay. And I was just like, I don't think I'm ready to uproot my life to Southeast Asia just yet. And so basically, the only way that I was able to stay in Saudi Arabia and quote unquote carry on like dating him or seeing him in my parents' eyes was for me to get married. So yeah, that's what kind of brought that on. I was quite young, and I was in no rush to. But yeah, then you have the added cultural pressure of, because I said we could just do a simple signing, right? Let's just at least then we have freedom to travel back and forth and things like that. And he can stay over at, the parents' house and vice versa. But then there's the added cultural thing of that looks shady. It looks like you guys are eloping or something's gone wrong. So we need to do the whole shebang in front of everyone. So that's like how I kind of got into that situation.
So, how did you feel about him? Did you feel like you were in love? Did you feel like this was your person?
To be honest, like I said, I was quite young, but and I didn't know at the time. But it seemed like it was like something out of a movie initially, and now in hindsight, I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is clear love bombing. Like it makes
Hmm.
so much sense now. And I had moments in, what while that I guess that most honeymoon movie type period was going on, that this seems like it's a lot, and it's a lot very quickly, and it seems like grand gestures, but again, young silly naive me just kind of lapped it up and went with it. And naturally, if that's how something starts. I mean, the things that I've looked into now and the things that I understand is if something like that starts like that, it's probably going to crash and burn really really quick when the mask slips on the other side, like once you're married and he's got that ring on the finger and things are different.
Okay, so you think that he maybe had a motive to marry you up and then just do a rug pull and treat you completely different?
I didn't think that at the time, but in hindsight, like the way that his behavior just straight up changed after the honeymoon, and it was almost like, and then I didn't even see like any motive from him per se, but it was the actions of his parents, like the amount of times like his dad would call me and take an interest in like our travel arrangements or how many times I was going to the UK. And then it kind of crossed my mind that is he talks about passports and immigration a lot, like are they trying to maybe do this just to get him a British passport? Because I kept, again, I wasn't happy in the marriage very early on, so I kept going myself to Malaysia or coming back to the UK just to take a break. And like, when he wasn't going to work, and again, just very happy to spend his parents' money and live this really ultra bougie lifestyle that he's not really worked for during the day. And I just couldn't respect that about him. So I would keep flying away and I would keep kind of giving him ultimatums. And then he would just lie to me that he has been at work and things. But I could see that his dad was getting agitated that he's missed out on all these trips to the UK, which would obviously really help his passport thing one day. So then, I mean, but when things got really bad, like Shelise, it was just daily things, like things where I would have to start recording what he was saying because he would say something and then completely flip and make me feel like I had completely lost my mind or misread that whole situation.
Mm.
When this was happening for a while, I was like, this is not normal. Like, you shouldn't have to. Like, I was replaying stuff and being like, look, this is you saying this. Like, what? I'm literally not crazy. And over time, like, again, that's not my personality at all. Like, I'm quite strong-headed, and I know what I've seen or I know what I've heard. Pretty good at reading a situation for the most part. So when he was trying to like really wear me down in that sense, I remember being at home. We had a little puppy, but every time I would see his car like pull up towards the house, I would start getting like really really bad anxiety. Like my heart would start, like you get palpitations, and I would just get the puppy, get the lead, and like just want to be out in public. And I would go on like these long like 1-2 hour walks just so he would call, see where I was, but I could like gauge his mood while I was out on this walk in public, like just in case. um And then I was like, this is not normal. Like when he leaves for work, like I lock the door, like, and then I like have like some time to just like clear my mind and just think about things. Then when he comes, like I leave, or when he's at home, I'm always just trying to say to him, like, let's go out, let's go for dinner, let's do something so that we're not in a close, confined space together. Then yeah, there was some really weird kind of antics of his that I didn't understand. And then once when it got really, really like weird, like I thought I could confide in his sister and I thought I could trust her. So I asked her to come for lunch one day because he had been watching like the OJ trial. There was like a series about it, and I was asleep, and I'd obviously confided in one of my best friends at that point that things are really weird and they're not, I don't know, I can't really make sense of things. But I just said to her, like, if you ever get a random message from me, just please call the police. And like one night he was watching that series and I was asleep, and he like came and like leant over me and said, this is such a great show, like you need to watch it. And I remember thinking, like, I've never been so creeped out in my life. And I think that was like the final straw. I kind of planned in my head that I need to make an exit plan and I just need to like do it without him knowing. Like, this is, if he's either going to kill me or I'm just going to completely lose all sense of myself. But
Jeez.
I am not going to be okay if I stay in this house.
Yeah. So then what did you do? I mean, clearly you're not feeling safe at home. How old are you now at this point?
I was, I think, 23 at this point.
Mm, okay.
Yeah. So I had started, so I literally, like, one of the times that he said something and like stormed off and went to work, I actually typed in to Google what he said because I was like, in my head, I had like a really, really, like nice upbringing, like a loving, nurturing family. So I had no idea like that people talk to other people like this. And I thought, dude, you don't even speak to your enemy like this, let alone like your life partner, somebody you're supposed to like love and care about and respect. So I actually typed in what he said to me. And I think I wrote something so stupid as like put his words in verbatim and wrote, is this normal? Question mark.
Oh my gosh. Do you remember what it was?
It was, I think it was just, it was something either to do with my family or me, just like something so degrading that I was like, how did your brain even come up with that? But no, I've had lots of, not lots, but I had EMDR therapy after that. So thankfully, a
Mm,
lot of this has been wiped out of my brain, which is why I'm able to like smile and get through this and tell you because, yeah, a lot of it is kind of blurry in that sense. But what I remember is when I typed in that search, the first thing that came up was just pages and pages of, are you being emotionally abused? Is it like, are you being psychologically abused? And now to me, all I thought abuse ever was like physically hitting someone, right?
right.
Like punching the crap out of them or something like that. I had no idea you could be financially abused. I had no idea you could be emotionally or psychologically abused. I did not know these things existed, but I opened the first thing on Google and it was just like a checklist of, does he make you feel like this, like this, like this, like this? Do you now feel like this, like this, like this? Do you feel like your personality has changed from this to this? And I was so shook when I was reading through that. And I was like, oh my God, yes, 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 like tick, 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 tick. And I remember like, again, this was one of those moments like when I realized Islam was wrong. It was like something just washed over me. In that moment, I was like, holy crap, I now understand what is being done to me and why I feel like crap all the time, like why I'm so demotivated. I started watching, like Googling TED Talks on how not to be depressed or how to get your mojo back and like things like that because yeah, I just couldn't understand it. But for the first time in my life, I was starting to think, is it really worth it? Like, is there any point to this? And like, this can't be like surely what like marriage or life or anything is about. And I think that's when I ultimately made the decision to myself. Again, I didn't want to get my, as bad as it is, because they were so supportive and they are. But again, my cultural mindset, the religious conditioning, all of that tells you, look, you're supposed to make a marriage work regardless. At least that's what the generations previously did. Whatever cards you're dealt, you deal with it. And nobody had been divorced in my family. So I was like the first one, and I'm the eldest of four children. And I was like, I can't set this example. And also because I had that moment where I was kind of seeing him before we got married, it's almost like he was my choice. So it's like you've made your bed, you lie in it. And
Mm,
I stayed. I'm not saying I stayed for so long because I don't have that personality. I did duck out of there, but I stayed for longer than I should have. Still.
Yeah, that's really, really hard being in that situation, especially with so much pressure. And I can imagine it was so confusing because clearly your intuition and all the research you're doing is telling you it's time to go, but you're not feeling that permission. You're not giving yourself that permission. Did you ever confide in your family about what was going on?
Ultimately, yeah. So things got quite bad, and I was planning my escape anyway. But my dad had come back into town for a business meeting, and because I was like so in my own head about my what I was planning to do, and I was getting as much of my things together, and just kind of tunnel vision, I think I was not very responsive to him, and he kind of had a gut feeling that something's off. So he reached out to my best friend, and she just couldn't keep it to herself anymore. She just like burst out crying to him, and she just said, "Look, I'm sick of trying to tell her to leave, and she's trying to like hold on to all of this guilt and shame, and I've got to make it work. So I'm just going to tell you." And that's when everything changed. My dad literally just called me, and he's like, he didn't call me, sorry. He told my best friend, he said, "You just go and pick her up right now, tell her to get her passport and just get the hell out."
Mm.
And that's essentially what she did. So I couldn't even plan anything, to be honest. I literally kissed my dog for the last time, and I just got
Mm.
what I could. And I know. Um, and I just, yeah, I left. And again, thankfully, my parents were so supportive. I moved back in. They moved back to Dubai. Eventually, I moved back in with them after a few months, and I got an amazing job. And things were looking good until, boom, he hits me with this stupid Sharia thing that was obviously the reason I ultimately left Islam. But yeah, not in that kind of moving away from him phase, it was good for a while.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Sharia law and what happened.
Yeah, so essentially, because as you can imagine, this was very one-sided, and I kind of, if you will, like not really pulled a fast one, but he was not expecting me to have the support of my family and stuff the way that I did. So essentially, he did not want a divorce. He didn't want a separation. He did not want this, everything that he had to just be taken away from him. And so, while again, my dad was trying to make us reconcile a few times until I actually had to like drill it home, and he saw his behavior himself, and that's when he realized, and he's like, "Yeah, there is no more." Like we were trying to do it civilly and amicably, so you don't have to go through the courts to separate. My parents just wanted to have a conversation, and we it would just save everyone time, and it's more convenient, and it's just less hostile, to be honest, if the cards are on the table. So we tried that for one or two attempts, and then when that kind of went to pot, the next thing I know is when I think, okay, maybe we'll revisit this soon, or we'll figure another way out somehow. I'm casually going to work one day, and I get a call from the Dubai police, and he just tells me that you have been put, like this order has been put on you, which is called da azawjia. He just said it to me in Arabic. He didn't even explain what that means, and I didn't know what that meant. And he's like, "You must return to your husband's house, or we will forcibly arrest you and take you back there, and you can't leave without his permission or consent." So you're essentially like stuck in, held hostage in your husband's house, and the law is
Wow.
like sanctions that.
That is wild. So what happened?
So I mean, I was when I asked him like, "What do you mean by tahazawjia?" And he says, "Oh, he explained what it meant." And again, I was shocked, and I ran straight back to my parents, and I said, "Guys, this is the law that they're putting on me," and they couldn't believe it either. They have grown up in England, and they would assume that no judge would ever send you back into an abusive marriage or something like that. So I explained to them that no, that's not how it works here, and they can do that. So the only way to counter that is to actually file for divorce in the courts and say that I give up all my, let's say, rights, because there's nothing really, but I give up all my rights Islamically that I'm entitled to as a wife, because you're basically you're doing something so bad by asking for a divorce that nothing that Islam, gives you to protect you as a woman should be yours anymore. That's
Mm.
kind of the logic. Like it's so, yeah. So I was like more than willing to forgo that. It's just a bit of cash. For me, the divorce was far more important. But then what they do is they put you through like Islamic couples counseling or therapy before they even hear your case at the court, before they even lodge it. So you have to sit with that man in session after session with another, let's say, Emirati sheikh who's ultra conservative, ultra misogynistic, no concept of mental health, in fact believes in like demons and possessions and all of this stuff instead. And he's trying to convince you to go back to your husband or give him another chance. And he's using all the might of religion and the Quran and God and all that stuff. Literally, when I was telling him stuff that I would experience, this guy and my husband, my ex-husband, on purpose would say the reason that she wants to divorce me is because there's a jinn, which is like an Islamic demon inside me, and so I'm not thinking straight because that jinn, that demon, is taken like speaking on my behalf, because the real me would never want a divorce.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I have no words.
Exactly.
I mean, what happened?
This Emirati sheikh guy, the cleric who's dealing with this therapy, is listening to this as if it's freaking real. Okay, so he's like, "Oh, okay. Well, how many times do you pray right now? Because just like maybe try praying 5 times a day, or try praying 5 times a day, and then just meet him for a coffee, like in public." Like he was trying to test, like, if I pray 5 times a day, will this demon come out of me? Will I suddenly fall in love again with this guy if I meet him for coffee outside? And I was sticking to my guns, and I categorically said, I refuse to even make eye contact with this man, like, let alone go and have a nice casual coffee with him by the beach. Like, are you out of your mind? Um, so when I pushed through those sessions, that's when your case starts getting heard at the court very, very slowly. And again, because Ramadan, the holy month, comes around, literally normal routine and life stops in like countries that follow that. So court cases get put on hold. Nobody's really going to their jobs. The lawyers aren't doing their work. The judges have slowed down everything. So he was not showing up to court hearings and then letting the month of Ramadan come in to like prolong and prolong and prolong this process, all while I'm trying to get on with my new life. I'm trying to enjoy my job. I'm trying to begin to have faith in men again, to start thinking about dating. I'm trying to like do all of these normal things. And he has essentially like my nearest petrol station, I'm saying, my nearest police station in my house. He was hanging out there almost 24/7 with his family. So he was getting all kind of friendly with those cops and officers, and he had got someone to kind of watch my window to see when I was at home, to the point where like our home help at the time would have to take me from the back entrance into an Uber for me to go to work and come back. And sometimes I would wake up and he would have thrown, like in Islam we have black magic as a concept, so you can use black magic to harm somebody essentially, or get what you want. And a lot of even Arabs and South Asian Muslims really, really, and sorry, every kind of Muslim from conservative backgrounds believe this stuff. So certain African countries have their own kind of ways of doing it. Pakistan, you'll get different ways that they do it in India and Bangladesh, and same with the Arab world, right? So I would sometimes wake up to concoctions of whatever his family or his views are of how you make this black magic work, with like literally Shelise, like bits of hair, like bones, fish
Oh.
bones, like mud, like weird stuff, all like put together in some weird concoction, thrown in my villa door. So like I would have to come out and like step into it directly. And
Uh,
again, I never really bought into black magic in the sense that this stuff could work. I just thought about it like in a really, I did believe it to a certain extent when I was Muslim, but not this stuff. But the lady that was, seeing this, and she was kind of keeping me away, she would freak out when she would see this. She would make me walk around it, and she was so scared of like what it could do. But things basically got ridiculous for me. Like I couldn't live an iota or a semblance of a normal life. And there was like the World Cup, the football World Cup was on, and me and my colleagues were going to watch England play. And he literally showed up there and like just was stalking me, sitting in a cap, like in the back rows, to the point where my colleagues had to say, Nuriyah, don't freak out. But he's literally sitting at the back watching you. And they just kind of like put a wall like around me, and like we got out of there. But it got too much because this was him on the one hand, and then the police on the other hand were calling me non-stop. And they're calling me like after 10 p.m., when you're not allowed to do that in Dubai. And because I'm a woman, you're not allowed to constantly harass me with male police officers. So once they even showed up to my house with 4 male police officers to arrest me because I had colleagues over, and it was a mixed group of guys and us. So he was watching my house, and he called the police saying, there's guys in her house, go and arrest her for adultery or something.
Oh.
So four of them, yeah. So according to Islamic law, four like policemen came, knocked on my door, and thank heavens I knew that the law in Dubai was you need a female officer. I can't go alone in a car with them. I need because and so you use Islamic laws against them, right? Like fine. So I said to them, well, you can't take me because there's not a female officer. And my father, again, coming back to that mahram concept of your guardian in Islam, because I had moved divorced or separated from my husband, trying to get a divorce, because I've moved now from his guardianship back to my father's. I said, because he's not here, my guardian, I can't go with these random men, right? Because they are marriageable
Mhm.
men. So use that against them, kind of thing. So just on that little loophole, they were like, okay, fine, come tomorrow, come tomorrow. And again, their whole ruse of trying to get me to come was to hand over my passport. So essentially, I would be at the behest of them in Dubai. Like I wouldn't be able to go away. And that's when they could charge me with anything according to Sharia. So at the very, very last minute, I was so drained. I was exhausted. My battery had, I was so tired of like fighting these policemen off. I was tired of, and it was getting too much. Like I would open my curtains and be peering outside to see if someone was watching me. I'd have to have friends stay over whenever my parents were out of the country. Things got so bad. They were sending random food delivery parcels to my house with like these weird cryptic notes. I mean, they were really like trying to just mess with me and break me down. I don't know. So when it got like too much and I had no choice, but I was like, you know what, these people are gonna win at the end of the day. They're gonna get me to the station, they're gonna get my passport. I was so defeated that I was right outside the police station about to just cave in and hand over my passport. My lawyer had just gone in before me to talk to them about what was happening with the case. And I think, I don't know what came over me, but I just said, let me just call just the emergency number for UK expats or something, because before I go in there and I'm like lost to the hands of these men to whatever Sharia um, punishments or stuff they want to put on me, at least the British Embassy or somebody should know what's happened to me and what kind of things they're charging me with, because this is ludicrous. And I'm not stupid. Like I'd watched a lot of banged up abroad in Dubai, and I knew how Brits could get into Dubai and trouble in Dubai over the smallest things, like brushing past somebody the wrong way at a nightclub or trying to stop your pint being dropped on someone, but a little bit drops on an Emirati and he reports you to the police. It could be game over for you, like something as tiny as that. So a part of me just wanted them to know that, hey, this is your citizen in this country and this is what they're doing. So I called this number, and I didn't never even thought in my life these numbers work or if there's anyone servicing them behind on the other side. But thankfully, this man answered, and I within 30 seconds, like I was panicky, but I just gave him a quick rundown. I was like, "Look, I'm literally like I'm outside Basha police station. They're asking my passport. They've been asking for weeks now. This is happening. They're charging me with all these things. They're stalking me. I've got videos." And he just said, "Have you got your passport in your hand?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, I can't give you legal advice, but do not go in there and hand it to them. Do not. He's like, I would suggest just drive to the airport right away, because come back home where these stupid charges don't apply. Because I told
Mm.
him what they were trying to charge me, what they were doing. And at the very same time, my lawyer runs out of the police station, and she is also telling me, like giving me like the gesture to leave. She said, go, because they're gonna make your life hell here. And she said, I know all you wanted was a divorce, and I was telling you to stay here and fight for that. But she's like, pardon my French, but she was like, F that. Like, F your divorce, you can get it even being back in England. But they have decided they are going to make your life a living nightmare. So that's it. I literally called a mate of mine and I said, look, can you just please get me on the next plane out of Dubai? And she was so clever as well. She didn't get me on the literal next flight, which was just to Oman, which is very like shares a lot of airspace with Dubai. Again, very strict Sharia country. So she booked me on a plane via Baku to Azerbaijan, and I just legged it to the airport. And they were hours away from putting a travel ban on me. So
Oh
as
my
you can imagine,
gosh.
every time I was kind of going through the airport, I was so scared that my Emirates ID, my residency, would like beep. And it did just as I was about to get on the plane. It went crazy beeping, and already the plane was like not taking, like we hadn't boarded the plane at the time we should have. And right when I was waiting to board the plane, I got a final call from the police saying, when are you coming to hand in your passport? and the call to prayer was going on above me in the airport, and I was like, please don't be like let them not hear an airport announcement. So I made it so quick on the phone, like while the call to prayer was happening, because then they can't hear like the airport tannoy over that, they would just hear that. So I
Oh
said,
my
I
gosh.
know. I just said, I'm in the mall and I'm going to come and give you my passport. Like, I'm on my way to you now. And I just shut the phone, went to the desk. They scanned my boarding pass. It beeped like crazy. And I was like, that's it. That's it. Like, I'm done for. And I said, why is it beeping? And she said, oh, Miss Khan, is it okay if we move you, bump you up right to the front of the plane?
Oh my
And I
gosh.
was so eager to just get off Dubai like airport. Like if I was like at least on the plane, I could argue this is maybe international ground now, maybe like anyway, I was like, whatever, I don't care. Move me to the front of the plane, just get me on the plane. But in my mind, I thought I'm gone. Like it's so much easier to arrest somebody from the front of the plane without causing a scene for the rest of the passengers, right? And stressing them out. So I was so mentally prepared. I was like, that's it. I'm going to get on the plane. Two officials are going to come, and that's it. I'm going to be taken all the way back to that prison, that police station. And it actually turned out that the reason that they had moved me to the front of the plane was because I'd probably booked this like 40 minutes before the check-in gate was to close, and they bumped me up to business class. So the first thing when I sat down, there was a cloth put over me, champagne being poured, and like a menu with like 7 courses. I couldn't believe it. I genuinely couldn't. And my mom, bless her, she was so worried. She was calling me. She's like, "Are you? Have you? Have the like the wheels of the plane got off the runway yet? Are you off the runway?" And I was just updating her like minutes now, minutes now, minutes to go. That feeling of just taking off out of UAE airspace was probably the most
Mm,
insanely liberating thing.
that is terrifying. Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine the panic that you must have been feeling. So once you got away, when you got back to London, what happened? Were you able to dissolve the marriage or did it matter anymore?
Well, that's the funny thing because it actually doesn't matter. Technically, like here, for all intents and purposes, I've never really been married because it was an Islamic marriage.
Oh.
It was a lot of it was probably just, I mean, I didn't have to do much when I came back to England, and I did get the official divorce in the end, which honestly meant nothing to me. It was more like I guess it was just like the end of a really twisted saga, because even if, I mean, I really wanted to see the word divorce because I wanted to be separated from this man and all of this, but the judge, the his kind of um like writings on the situation and the court case transcripts are so misogynistic and weird. It literally says, oh, like he, for all of the months that you were away and you weren't able to like afford makeup and afford jewelry, this is what Sharia would expect that you would get in damages, which is pittance anyway, because you've given up all your rights. So the only thing in Islam is that because your husband is meant to protect you, they don't have a concept of a woman being independent. So all of those times that he had dragged me in limbo and kept me in limbo with the court process, technically, and I was back under my father's care in Islam, not that you're earning yourself, they can't fathom that. But that's what my lawyer was fighting Islamically, to say, okay, well, look what he did. Even Islamically, there is a stipulation for every second, every day that you're outside of your husband's home, your basic needs he should be covering. So what the judge made of that was, this is the cost of lipstick, this is the cost of eyeliner. Literally, this is in the divorce proceeding. And I was like,
What?
no concept of stalking, no concept of mental health, no concept of the police station, no concept of breaching my privacy, no, none of that. Just the cost of lipstick for this amount of months. Like, this is how, I can't even describe, this is how basic and what's the word even, like,
Archaic?
yeah,
Archaic, but with lipstick. It's like, it's a very weird concept.
very, very weird concept. And like the dichotomy of, it's like male, man, provider, without him she is nothing, then she's like on the streets, she can't afford her lipstick, you like, that's your role, that's your, like,
She
what
can't
the.
afford her lipstick.
And why is that? Just because you should look good for your man? Like, this is the logic they're coming with, right? That's all a woman is good for. You're there to serve your man, you're there to be there for him, produce babies for him, like. So yeah, I mean, I did get the divorce. I got the dirty D word, as they like to call it, but it was after a very, very long time. I'm not sure how worth it was, but yeah, I did.
So, because of that, you said that's why you started to really deconstruct and decide to leave Islam?
Yeah, so this set me off on like a path of, obviously, once I had come back to the UK and things had settled, like I wasn't okay straight away at all. Like I just started writing, and I was really starting to think about, is this men who have abused their power and they're just on a power trip, like being in the police or the judge? I mean, at every level, like from my ex-husband to the police to the judge, are they all out like conspiring against me, or are they all just out here to make a woman's life hell or really keep her stuck in a shitty situation? um and for a while I was like, yeah, it's these men in their positions of power. But then when I eventually managed to get EMDR therapy, and I managed to confront, like, I guess that whole traumatic side of things where, like, because even coming back here, like, I wouldn't really go out of the house much. Police sirens here, I would still think that they were like the UAE police that were trying to get me. So these things that I had to like rewire my brain, and like, and in therapy, they kept saying, like, you're in England, like, you need to remember, here you're safe. The police here have nothing to do with you. And like actually like do all of this to the point where I'm at now. Obviously, it's just, I can laugh about it, I can joke about it, I can, breeze through the story. But there was a time where I couldn't, like, all that would happen was just like tears would like flow down from my face. And that was like, even my journey leaving Dubai was so traumatic, to coming here and rocking up and being surrounded by a family who were like, what's happened? We thought everything was perfect, but you loved him, but you chose to marry him, like all of that. So when I had some kind of downtime and I had dealt with the most PTSD elements of this, so I could actually process, I started to think to myself, okay, now I'm back in the UK, I'm going to start a new life for myself here. But people, when I try and tell them what's happened to me or my story, obviously a lot of people are going to blame that on Islam or Dubai or whatever. So I need to be ready for that, and I need to just be able to explain how none of this is really Islamic. If it comes up, this is just men abusing their power. Remember the story that I had set for myself in my head. Because Islam and Allah, to me, regardless of the things I had seen in Saudi Arabia, was still true and was still perfect. It was just humans that were infallible, not God or not the religion. But
Mm.
what happened was, I knew that Sharia comes from the Quran because I had done a module of Islamic law at university. So I had that basic knowledge that if something is in Sharia, there must be some kind of derivation of that found in the Quran, because Sharia is not coming out with anything from thin air. Sharia is basing itself on God's word, and God's word is the Quran. Not even, and this is important because I come from a Sunni background, as I said. So we also believe in the Hadith, which is the sayings of the Prophet and the way he lived his life. A lot of how we govern our daily lives comes from that, as opposed to the Quran. The Quran is more the generic book. But I thought, okay, there was this law put on me to forcibly, like, essentially kidnap me, arrest me, take me to my husband's house, and keep me there as a prisoner. If that's Sharia, then that has to have come from the Quran. So I Googled Da'ah Zawjiyah, I Googled the Islamic discussions that were had around this subject, and then I was like, okay, where are those Islamic scholars pointing to? They go back to the Quranic verse for women. And so I had only ever read the Quran in Arabic a couple of times, yeah, as you're supposed to, which is a foreign language to me. I'm not Arabic, don't know Arabic in that sense. If anything, I was learning classical Arabic while I grew up in Saudi and Dubai, which is just to speak it. You won't understand the Quran from learning that. So I was like, screw this shit. Let me Google the Quran in English. Like, I want to be an adult. I want to see what my God is telling me, because I never had really done that. So I Googled Quran.com and I read it. And that was the first time that I had come face to face with what the Quran actually says and what God is, in talking to me, allowing for. And I studied law at university. So critically, I was just looking at that and I was thinking, from this verse of God, I can definitely put that law on myself easily. Absolutely easily. Like,
Mm.
it's waiting to happen. It's a foregone conclusion. And that's when I was really, really like, no, this can't be happening. Like, because this is Allah himself. This isn't like even like the Bible, where it's like the inspired word of God or something. This is, if there is one thing wrong in the Quran, Islam is done. Because that is God speaking himself. So again, I'm trying to cling on to my religion. Like, this could not be true. This could not be the reality of the situation. So I tried to give Allah such a free pass there and say, if he's messed something up, then Muhammad, he had not even messed something up. He can't mess something up. But essentially, if he's kept something vague, then Muhammad has come and set the record straight that, hey, this is vague in the Quran, but this is how we treat women amazingly, that none of this can ever happen. And so, because of my Sunni background, I went back into what would Muhammad say? What would Muhammad do? So I went to the hadiths, which is more about his personal life and his daily interactions and his kind of, things on his kind of final decisions on women matters and domestic violence and things like that. And that was the beginning of the end. It was I had gone my whole life not knowing that Muhammad was married to a child bride, that he essentially consummated. I hate using that word for it because it's something else entirely, but he consummated the marriage at 9, according to these are scriptures, by the way. You have to remember, I can't, as a Sunni Muslim, reject. Because if I reject them, I'm rejecting Islam. Even if I was to reject this hadith, I wouldn't know how to pray 5 times a day. I could maybe pray 3 times a day just by mentioning or remembering God, but I would not know how to do the Islamic prayer. So for me, the Quran had failed me now, and the Hadith had failed me. And I mean, when I say failed, I mean I was sick to my stomach, like sick to the core. I could not believe that this was a religion. Like, what I was reading seemed like absolute filth from like the mind of a twisted cult leader, from a bygone era. And I could not believe that my family believed this, that people have lived and died in the name of this. Everybody around me still believes this. Like, as I'm searching this, I was in my grandma's house and there was a huge Allah sign and a huge Muhammad sign in front of me. And I'm there reading this. And then I looked at that and I Googled, is Islam the truth? And I just had to let myself hear something from a native Arabic speaker to know that I'm not crazy or I'm not missing the right meaning. And that's what Islam tells you. Like, you need to speak Arabic to fully understand it and to fully criticize it. So when this native Arabic speaker, amazing channel, by the way, shout out to him on YouTube, Master Arab, he would speak in English and then he would also speak in Arabic. And he made those direct links from Quran verses to ISIS behavior, from Quran verses to Sharia hudud punishments that I mentioned to you about amputations and beheadings, directly from the Quran. The punishment for apostasy, the fact that there's no lower age limit to get married to children, essentially in the Quran. Once I heard it from, like, for lack of a better word, but straight from the horse's mouth, I thought, my brain is not playing tricks on me. If he's saying that and he's Arab and he's a native Arab speaker and he's coming to the same conclusions that I am on just reading this in a little bit in English, then surely, like, this can't be right. And I remember looking up at those signs and thinking, that signifies now to me one of the most evil things to ever have like come down on this planet, to be honest. And it was just game over from there. The rug was pulled from under my feet, and yeah, life was never the same.
Oh man, I know that moment all too well when you realize everything that you've ever believed, your entire culture, the people around you, everything is just a lie. It's so confusing and it feels like such a betrayal to have believed something so wholeheartedly, to have completely revolved your entire life around something that turns out to be made up in a way. And I mean, I don't mean to say that in like a derogatory term to anyone who still believes it. It's just that was my experience with Mormonism when I was like, oh, Joseph Smith literally just made up the Book of Mormon, and it
Yeah.
was like a heart-stopping moment, and you have to go, well, what now? So with that, what did you end up doing? I mean, obviously deconstruction takes years and years for most people. So how did you come out on the other side and decide to start speaking up on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so basically, I know you're right. Like, usually this is such a kind of slow burn process because you're still like, stupid things. Sorry to people who still believe this, but I mean, I think it's kind of stupid. But when I say things like when you're a Muslim, you'd say like mashallah or like thanks to Allah or inshallah, like God willing. Or like when you sneeze, you say this blessing in Arabic, and it's quite long back and forth in Islam. So even now, like, I still accidentally am, like, my programming just says that and I take it back really quick, or like I say like so like little things like that, which I'm still unlearning. But for the most part, once I typed that, is it the truth? And I had the moment when I have realization of this is so man-made that it's unreal that so many people attribute divinity to this. It was kind of like a quick, everything fell apart. Like, I know a lot of people seek solace in exploring other religions as well and other philosophies, but for me, I was so, like you said perfectly, like you feel so betrayed and so kind of on guard. Like I was literally like, fool me once, like shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
Yeah.
I literally, that was my thing. I had gone so tunnel vision now where I'm like, I'm not going to believe, hear, accept anything unless I see it with my own eyes and there's complete evidence for it. So that kind of helped me start the building blocks of building up my worldview without Islam, building up my moral compass without Islam, which sounds silly because I think my moral compass was always, and this is the truth for most Muslims that I know as well, was always way better than Islam. I say that like Islam teaches you manufactured hate. Like I was supposed to hate
Mm.
Jewish people. I was supposed to, no matter what, how friendly and how good friends I was, I'm supposed to hate any friends of mine that were homosexual. I just had to by default know that my God, no matter how cool we are in this life, my God is going to burn you like a shish kebab in hell. So
Mm.
so I could like embrace my natural, I don't know how to say it, but like my natural non-hate. Do you know what I mean? I could just be like a human. I could actually not have to force myself to think of Christians as eternally wrong or that their books have been corrupted and they're misguided and we're so blessed for being born Muslim. So I guess I just started consuming a lot of content that was just people speaking up against Islam to see the level of brainwashing that I had been put under. And again, massive shout out to like the ex-Muslim community had kind of got going by this point. So AP had been around for a while. So I watched a lot of his content. There's a Council of Ex-Muslims Britain, like an actual organization that's started in the UK. So I was reaching out to the founder of that. And I remember saying to her, look, I feel pretty privileged and safe given my life and my current kind of, where I am and how mentally over the stuff that I've gone through I am. Because I think I can talk about Islam in a way now that hopefully other women can learn through my lived experience. But my major concern was for safety because, as I'm sure you know, London is kind of overrun by Islamists. If you think about it, it's not really the place it was once. I mean, coming back here, I've had to be careful the areas that I've choose to live in and stuff like that. And like I mentioned to you off air, I keep a lot of my life private. Even my social media handles, I only open up X and YouTube to the world, really. But when I got like when she also said to me, look, like I've heard your story and I can see your passion, and to be honest, like safety is a concern, but if you feel up for it, I would say go for it. And she, again, a couple of women that I really, really looked up to just gave me like the green light, like we've got your back. If this is something that you think, you would help and that you can do, by all means do it. Because there's not many people who have the security of still keeping their familial relationships and having the ability to show their face and say what I'm saying now. I've cut my ties to like
Mm-hmm.
Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So I won't discuss certain things because some of my family is still there. But I made a decision that I I will cut off that part of the world to me for speaking the truth about kind of what I've lived through, because this is so avoidable on so many levels. If I go into a bit more detail of my story in Dubai, if we just added a divorce clause in the marriage contract, a lot of this would have been saved. But basically, Islamically, you're not automatically given the right to divorce as a woman. That right is only for a man. So it's unilaterally a right given to the man as per the Quran itself. So something as simple as that. Now Muslim countries like in Pakistan and Tunisia, in these countries, they've actually added a concept of khulla, which is a woman can go to the court and ask for a divorce. Something like that can be life saving for a woman who is in an abusive situation
Mm-hmm.
or, just wants to leave Islam or whatever the hell's going on. But yeah, I guess I spent a couple of years figuring out who I am post Islam, just getting comfortable in knowing that there's so much I need to unlearn, and there's so many exciting things to learn. Like I can actually care about science now more, and I can respect it for what it is, and I don't believe in these crazy conspiracies I once used to. And I'm sorry to say I did. I believed in a lot of ridiculous conspiracies, anti-Semitic conspiracies, stupid things about the end of days and the one-eyed monster, and just ridiculous things. And I just feel like I have a lot more of a grasp in reality now, and I just wanted to share that with the world. felt it was like a duty, you know, once you know how bad and dark Islam is, to even try and relay that to people without being so crass and crude, because it is filthy parts of it. But if I can even like wake up one woman or have them not experience what I did, that's kind of how I got going. An aim to do that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing everything. And we're about out of time, but I know this isn't going to be our last conversation. So thank you for coming on and sharing. I'm so excited to talk to you further. For now, let's just get your Linda Listen moment, your sassy statement as the viral video with the toddler goes, or something inspirational if you prefer that.
Yeah, sure. I guess this is rolling off what AP said, because he's got it into people's psyche so good about staying away from Islam. But I would just say, if you ever are mistaken or think that Islam or Sharia is attractive to you because you've been failed by the West, then please just know that this is a monster lurking beneath, waiting to kind of, I don't know, eat you up into 7th century barbarity. So please, please, no matter how bad the Western democracy and things might seem to you, Islam and Sharia is definitely not the answer.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. Everyone, go check out her YouTube channel, Holy Humanist. I'll put all the links in the description. Go see what she's up to over there. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing to spread awareness.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'd love to repay the favor and have you on as well. Like a woman who's left,
Oh,
especially
sure.
something like Mormonism. Sure, we have so much to talk about, but yeah, I respect your journey as well. Anyone that's kind of gone through something like this and come out and then also has the guts to talk about it. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I hope to speak to you further as well.
Yeah, that would be great. There's a lot of similarities between Mormonism and Islam. I've done a video with apostate Aladdin on it, and it was like, wow, staggering. But of course, my experience, I don't feel like is anything compared to most people I have on this channel. It's pretty tame, but I'm absolutely willing to talk about it anytime.
Oh yeah, for sure, for
So,
sure.
any other final thoughts before we go?
So I just gonna say I came across your channel because I saw the title and it just caught my attention. So Cults to Consciousness, I love that title, and yeah, just keep doing what you guys are doing, and hopefully a couple more collabs that we can do just to raise awareness against both of these things, I guess.
Yes, amazing. Thank you so much. And guys, if you're watching, please leave those words of encouragement down below for our guest here today for bravely coming on and sharing her story. Go check out her YouTube as well. Any way that you can interact with this video, liking, subscribing, of course, always boosts the algorithm so more people can see it and become aware. If you want to support the channel even further, you can become a patron at patreon.com/cults2consciousness, or you can get some of our merch if you want to do that at cults2consciousness.com. We have some Apostates Unite t-shirts. I'm sorry for what I said when I was in a cult. Break the silence, break the cycle. We're in the process of updating, so keep checking back there. If you enjoyed this video, I'll link 2 more down here below you can check out. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.